Nintendo Switch games you should buy before they get expensive. Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel. Its-A-Mii here. Today I wanted to talk about Nintendo Switch games that I have in my collection that I think you should consider buying if you're A, worried about them going up in price down the road, but also just some suggestions, some cool games for your Nintendo Switch collection will be presented in this video. Let's get into it. A few ground rules here. I will be going off of price charting values for these games. I'll have them up on screen so you can see what they're going for roughly right now. Also, just goes without saying, don't watch this video thinking, oh, I'm gonna buy these games and flip them later because this kid on the internet thinks they're gonna get expensive. Don't do that. Watch this video if you are interested in learning about some hidden gems on the Switch that I personally, for one reason or another, think might end up getting expensive down the road. I also will say no limited run stuff in this video. While I do collect limited run games, it kind of goes without saying that a lot of limited run games will go up in price over time. Maybe I could do a separate video on that, but I've narrowed it down to about, I want to say like 30 games here from a few key publishers, Square Enix being one of the big ones, Nintendo, NIS America, Koei Tecmo, and then from there I have a few kind of stragglers that I thought would be interesting to talk about and say, hey, maybe if you're trying to build a Switch collection, you should try to get these now before they get too expensive. All right, first up, we have a Square Enix game that you've probably never even heard of. The fact that this has a physical release is honestly pretty surprising to me. This is Oninaki by Square Enix. Now, you might be noticing here, oh, where's the ESRB? This is one of those Asian, English, Chinese releases that you can import through Play Asia or a website like Video Games Plus. They're a Canadian retailer. I mean, at this point, this might only be on eBay, but this is a very cool action RPG that released back in 2019 from a studio called Tokyo RPG Factory. I believe they have been dissolved into Square Enix, but this is a pretty niche game from Square Enix that released back a few years ago, and I actually really enjoyed this one. I will say, if you're new to collecting, general rule of thumb, JRPGs or games by studios like Square Enix usually will creep up in price over time. Now, this isn't like a foolproof thing. Oninaki here, which is currently going for, according to price charting, $43 complete. This game could plummet one day, but I would not necessarily bet for that, and if the game looks interesting to you, I would say try to buy it now before it eventually goes up and up. And Switch is in an interesting spot right now where we're expecting new hardware in the next year or two. Usually, that's when collecting gets cheapest, and then it eventually starts rising as people start getting more nostalgic for the platform again. So, Oninaki right here for 43 bucks. If you can find this for cheap at a local game store or something, I definitely recommend checking out, especially if this gameplay I'm showing right now is of interest to you. Next up, we have the Collection of Mana from Square Enix, although I guess you could really include all three Mana games. So, Collection of Mana was released on Switch, then we had Trials of Mana, the remake that came out, and then we also had Legend of Mana, which was similar to Oninaki, one of those kind of weird limited releases that was available for imports from Asia. So the interesting thing with Collection of Mana, if you don't know, this is a collection of the original three Mana games, so Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, as well as Secret of Mana on the SNES, and then for the first time, the SNES version of Trials of Mana got translated, which is really cool. Of course, it also got remade. However, the weird thing about Collection of Mana is, and I still don't know why Square Enix did this, they never released this on any other platforms, as far as I'm aware. At the very least, it's not on PlayStation, which is where you would expect Collection of Mana to be. Like, you would think that they would put that on PlayStation. It's possible they release it on PlayStation down the line, but right now you can get this collection for Switch complete for like 22 bucks, and I totally recommend it. These games are awesome. This next game just released last December and actually was pretty hard to find at release, but Square Enix has since, I guess, reprinted it, and it's a little bit easier to find now, although it's still not much below MSRP. Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. This is the third mainline Dragon Quest Monsters game, of course, not counting the Joker sub-series. First Dragon Quest Monsters game to get localized in quite some time, and I really enjoyed this one. It is a Pokemon-style Dragon Quest game, so if you like monster taming games like a Pokemon, and you also like the world and vibe of Dragon Quest, this is definitely one to keep an eye out for. Seemed to be pretty low print, like I said, but at some point they must have reprinted it, because I remember back in December when it came out, retail copies were going for like 80 bucks on eBay. So at some point they figured out the stock issue, but I'm not sure how long that'll last. Next up, we have the Diofield Chronicle from Square Enix. Now, this one's kind of a personal pick. I don't know if this game will ever really get that expensive. However, I will absolutely say that I think it is a hidden gem. I really enjoyed the Diofield Chronicle. It kind of middling reviews, but you can pick up a complete copy for like 25 bucks, and it's just a unique strategy RPG from Square Enix with some really cool characters, great villain, cool voice acting, very budget presentation, like you would expect from like a Switch-focused Square Enix game. But Diofield Chronicle weirdly didn't get any attention, and I thought it was really cool. So for 25 bucks, you should add it to your collection. Here's one that pretty much any fan of turn-based RPG should look out for. Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. This is the Asian release, so you can get this for about, I want to say $80 from PlayAsia. If you like Final Fantasy, if you have any interest in exploring the Final Fantasy franchise, definitely get this, because while it's possible that PlayAsia just stocks this game indefinitely, it's also possible that eventually they pull the plug and you can no longer order Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. Now, the interesting thing with that is they did do an ESRB English release. That is right here. I was lucky enough to pre-order this back when they went up. This version with the ESRB on it is extremely expensive, like $300+ for a sealed copy of this game. Mine's still sealed. I bought the PlayAsia release because I knew this was super expensive, but considering how expensive this is, if they ever stop printing this one without the ESRB, that is the only difference, by the way. If they ever stop reprinting this one, I can definitely imagine a scenario where this gets very pricey very quickly, and I mean, it's 6 of the most all-time iconic JRPGs ever. If you like JRPGs, I mean, you probably already have this one, but you should definitely check it out. It feels like fate that I recorded this video and then just randomly this morning, Square Enix announces that they're reprinting this on both Switch and on PS4 as an ESRB copy. Now, this is technically a variant. It comes with a sticker sheet. It comes with the box art has a little bit more text on it, but for all intents and purposes, they actually did just reprint this. So I guess take this whole little Final Fantasy section with a grain of salt, but I would still argue they retail for $75. That's already above MSRP for a regular game. Kind of a weird release. If you like Final Fantasy, you should still buy it, but maybe not necessarily if you're doing things for value purposes, I guess. And just a few more Square Enix games that I have not actually played, but I've heard very good things about and look very interesting to me. Harvestella, this one is not very expensive right now. Kind of a life sim farming JRPG, but it has like dungeon crawling elements, JRPG combat. Yeah, this one looks really interesting. I haven't had time to get to it, but it's not very expensive right now. So, I mean, if it looks cool, you should buy it. And then finally, 2 big ones here. The World Ends With You Final Remix, which is actually a Nintendo-published game, which is interesting. Wrong one right there. That's a Nintendo-published game. For some reason, Nintendo published this. As well as Neo, The World Ends With You. Neo, The World Ends With You, the sequel, that one isn't too pricey right now, but The World Ends With You Final Remix has kind of gone up and down. I remember at one point it was above MSRP. I assume Nintendo did a pretty low printing of that game. At some point, they must have reprinted it. That right now is going for about $40 complete, so if you can find a good deal on that. This was, of course, a DS game. Like I said, I haven't played these. I do mean to get to them eventually, but I've always heard that The World Ends With You is like one of the all-time best DS JRPGs. I'm not too sure how the Switch version holds up. I know I've heard some people say like the touchscreen is kind of a necessity for The World Ends With You, so maybe that's something you would want to look for on the 3DS. But Neo, The World Ends With You, still very cheap right now. I want to say that's like a $25 game. I think Neo, The World Ends With You could end up becoming relatively rare because Square Enix didn't market that damn game at all. That game completely bombed. So maybe they stocked too many copies, so maybe there will be an influx of cheap copies. But eventually I could see, as more people learn about the franchise and want to get into it, copies of that game, because it is so cheap right now, actually going up. That's just my speculation, so don't take my word for it. But if you are interested in The World Ends With You, I would say those are 2 you should keep an eye out for. But now we move into our Nintendo first-party stack. I wanted to include some major first-party games from Nintendo because I know a lot of people that are getting into Switch collecting are going to be mostly interested in those kinds of games. So I've picked some that I think are, first of all, just very good games, but also some that I could see going up in price eventually. And a few of these are actually pretty cheap right now. So starting off, we'll start off with the 2 I showed at the beginning of the video. Pretty new releases here. Another Code Recollection. This is a series of story-based kind of adventure games, remakes of a DS and a Wii game in this nice little collection here. This just came out back in January of 2024. These, with Nintendo first-party games, you always have to understand that there are people that will go for a complete set of just Nintendo Switch first-party games. So inherently, there will always be a demand of something like another Code Recollection. However, right now, there's no one really talking about it because it is a very niche franchise that realistically most people don't care about. They're quality games, but it just doesn't have that word of mouth. No one is clamoring for another Code right now. So I imagine it's a pretty low print run. We know it sold under 1 million copies. Eventually, this is something that I could see getting kind of pricey. Similarly, I didn't include the rest of the franchise here, but this is a game that once again we know sold under 1 million copies. Nintendo has not reported that it did better than that at all. Is Bayonetta Origins: Cereza and the Lost Demon. Now, this one I think you can get still for like $25 complete off of eBay, which is really cheap for a first-party Nintendo game. This is a Bayonetta spinoff. It's kind of top-down, more storybook aesthetic. Really cool game. Definitely a hidden gem that not many people talked about when it came out back in 2023. And if you are a Bayonetta fan, I imagine this is something that you would want to get because eventually it's going to become pretty hard to find because there's not that many copies out there. And speaking of platinum games, just huge shout out to Astral Chain here. I'm not sure if this would necessarily get that expensive in the near future, but you know, long term, yeah. I mean, this is definitely one of the best action games on Switch. It sold over 1 million copies, so maybe, you know, supply of this game will be plentiful. But once again, I could imagine a scenario where eventually the demand overweighs the actual supply. So Astral Chain, if it interests you at all, I would definitely recommend it because it is a fantastic action game. Now, this next Nintendo published game, I think I might be the only fan of in the world. Daemon X Machina came out very similar time frame to Astral Chain. This is getting a sequel next year. Now, right now, you can get a complete copy for about $40 on eBay. It did spike back when they announced the sequel, I believe, or maybe it was around the time that Armored Core came out, but Daemon X Machina is a mech combat game. This was the first one I had ever played, but I thought it was a pretty good entry point. I love the visuals of this game, the high saturation, and very nice art direction, in my opinion. I know some people kind of don't agree with that, but I love the art direction of this game. Very corny plot, but very fun mech combat gameplay. It's getting a sequel soon, so one of those things where maybe the sequel just kind of replaces it, right? Like maybe it has basically all the contents of the first game and more, so maybe there won't really be a demand for Daemon X Machina, the first game on Switch. But if you can find this, if you're interested in mech combat games, I would definitely say give this one a shot if you don't want to wait for the sequel. Another weird one that Nintendo published for some reason back in 2019, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3: The Black Order. Now, if you are new to collecting and you don't know this, generally speaking, superhero game, go up. Superhero game get expensive because licenses run out, they expire, and eventually these types of games get delisted. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say like, yeah, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 is getting delisted anytime soon. I don't know what kind of deal Nintendo worked out with Marvel in terms of keeping these characters on the eShop in this game for the foreseeable future. They might have signed an incredible deal where this game never gets delisted. However, we have seen time and time again, Marvel games get delisted. It just happens like clockwork. So maybe Nintendo work out a special deal where that won't happen, but I would say if you are a Marvel fan and you like Marvel Ultimate Alliance, I believe Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 did get delisted actually before the PSN, PSN's still up, but the Xbox store shut down. I'm pretty sure those were already delisted and were kind of rising in price. I might be wrong about that, but Ultimate Alliance 3, very fun, kind of basic, little action game, but I mean, just kind of Marvel fan service. I actually like this one a lot. Another one that we know for sure did not sell over 1 million copies on Switch, Snipper Clips Plus Cut It Out Together, or Snipper Clips Cut It Out Together Plus. This was an eShop launch title for the Nintendo Switch, one of the most underrated Switch games. I love this game, so much fun co-op. Even if you play it single player, it's like still pretty fun. This has the DLC on cartridge, which I actually never played. I never tried out the DLC, but this is one of those weird things where they released it on the eShop and then eventually gave it a physical a few months later. So this is not super common. I don't see this when I'm out game hunting very often. I know I can speak from experience with something like Freaky Forms on the 3DS, where it launched as an eShop exclusive from Nintendo and then later on got a physical release. That game on 3DS is like $60 now, so it's over MSRP. Right now, Snipper Clips, you can still get it for like $25, I want to say. So if that's something that interests you, definitely check out that one. And then finally for Nintendo, we have a pair of games that just released at the end of 2023, right back to back, actually. I'll just go in and show them together here. WarioWare Move It and Super Mario RPG. Now, here's my reasoning for specifically recommending these two. First of all, WarioWare Gold on 3DS was the last WarioWare game on 3DS, and it got pretty pricey. I'm not sure if it came down, but I know during the peak of 3DS hype, WarioWare Gold definitely went up at one point. WarioWare Move It is, once again, a Nintendo-published game that we know for a fact did not sell 1 million copies, which is rare. There are not very many Switch games that didn't sell over 1 million copies, at least from Nintendo anyway. WarioWare Move It seemingly didn't do very well, and it's a really fun game, and that usually is a recipe for, oh, didn't sell very well, but it's actually a good game. Usually people are going to come back and want that later on when they aren't manufacturing copies. But then on the other side of that spectrum, we have Super Mario RPG, which sold very well. Super Mario RPG, I believe, is closing in on like 4 million units sold. Right now, you can get both these games for about $30, but Super Mario RPG is just so good that even though it sold very well, eventually I could still see there being a demand and people wanting more physical copies of this game to be out in the wild, because Mario RPGs do have a history of getting kind of pricey. We've seen it for basically every Paper Mario game, even including like Color Splash on the Wii U. Super Mario RPG, even though it did sell a lot and there are a lot of copies out in the wild, I can definitely see a future where there's just not enough, and it just naturally goes up over time. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about NIS America. Now listen, NIS America, could honestly be its own video. They have so many JRPGs and RPGs and other types of games published by them that, generally speaking, go up in price. That's a whole topic. So today I just want to recommend one series that, if you are interested in it, you should just go ahead and buy it, because history has shown whenever these games release, they just go up in price like immediately. And I'm of course talking about the Legend of Heroes series. Right here I'm holding Trails into Reverie. This is a very long running series of JRPGs from Falcom that NIS America publishes here in the West. There are so many of these games on Switch, and every single time they release one, they pretty much immediately go above MSRP. I'm looking here, Trails to Azure, that's about a $61 game complete, not even sealed. Trails into Reverie, the one I showed, that one's still about 60 sealed, 50 completes. There are more, like Trails into Zero, that's like a $65 game complete, $80 game new. That game just came out last year. So if you're interested in the Trails series, there are so many in this franchise. They're all connected. It's this huge, long-running thing. If that is something that interests you, it's a lot to get into, but there are so many of them, and they usually go up in price. I know Trails through Daybreak just got localized here and came out back in July, so maybe that would be a great starting point just to kind of buy, test out, see if you're interested in the franchise. But yeah, Trails is a series that gets expensive almost immediately for some reason. I don't know why they don't print more when there's clearly demand. So that's all I really wanted to focus on for NIS America today. Like I said, they have so much cool stuff that would be worth talking about. So if I do a sequel to this video, if this video does well, I will make a follow-up video where I talk a little bit more in depth about a lot of the weird kind of oddball NIS America releases, because they have just made so many like one-off games that you probably haven't even heard of. But next up, I want to talk a little bit about Koei Tecmo. Similar thing here, just going to focus on one franchise. They have not as much as NIS America, but they do have some other stuff that I could feature in another video. But for today, I just want to focus on the Atelier series. Now, you might have heard of the Atelier series. There are a lot of these games on Switch. This is kind of a cozy RPG adventure game where you do a lot of like crafting type things, but also there's some combat. I have only played one of these games. I've only played Its-A-Mii, which is a remake of the first game. Once again, one of those kind of Asian English releases here, so this one in particular might end up getting kind of expensive. But as someone who has not played these games, I will say I have heard nothing but recommendations from people that enjoy the series, and they're always trying to say, like, okay, if you're going to get into Atelier, you have to play the Ryza games. Ryza is, like, kind of what I would say launched the Atelier series into even higher popularity. I mean, it's still a very niche franchise, but there are so many of them, and I hadn't really heard people talking about Atelier until the Ryza series started. So some of these are already like over MSRP. I think Video Games Plus did a reprint of them, but we have Ryza 1 here, Ryza 2, I think this is the more expensive one, as well as Ryza 3, which just came out last year. So if that's something that interests you, there's plenty more Atelier where that came from. There's the like triple packs that you can get on Play Asia that have a bunch of like the PS3 games in a collection. There's more standalone games like Atelier Sophia or Sophie, I think. So Atelier, if that's a series that interests you, there's just a ton of those games, and they don't really go down in price. And then finally, just a few kind of oddball recommendations here for games that I really love that I actually recently found out one of these is pretty hard to find. So starting off, this is one I picked up at PAX West a couple of years ago. I didn't even know this specific version of this game released. I said no limited run games, and this kind of skirts around that rule. So limited run published individual versions of all three of these games from Inti Creates, and I'm of course talking about the Blaster Master series. However, at some point, Inti Creates published their own ESRB release of this game with all three games on the cartridge, with all of the DLC for Blaster Master 1 and 2 included there as well. So if you want to get the individual releases from Limited Run, that will probably run you about the same amount of money. This is still expensive. This is already expensive, I should say. So I guess it kind of goes against the idea of this video being like buy now before it goes up. This game's already up. This is like $100, I believe. But it's still a really cool kind of niche release that I wanted to show off because it's just really random that I haven't really seen many people talk about this specific release of Blaster Master Zero Trilogy. And these are freaking fantastic games. I love all three of them so much. And then finally, to close off this video, let's talk One Piece a little bit. I'm a big One Piece fan. I also like me some One Piece video games. So there are 4 One Piece games currently on the Nintendo Switch, I believe, by my count. One of them just came out. I don't actually have it yet, but One Piece Odyssey, I'm telling you right now, that game is going to be expensive on Switch. It was a very late port, and I doubt there are many copies of it in the wild. One Piece Odyssey, kind of a no-brainer. I still need to pick that one up myself, and I will be hopefully very soon. I'm waiting for Best Buy to do a buy two, get one again, hopefully. But there's also One Piece Unlimited World Red, which only got an English release in Europe, so that one's kind of expensive now. I still need to get that one myself as well. But the ones I have here that I really enjoy the most are the One Piece Pirate Warriors games. So already One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 is it's still going for like 40 bucks, which for a Warriors game, usually these plummet more than that. And this is a game that's still getting support. I don't think they're printing copies of it anymore, but it's still getting DLC. So One Piece Pirate Warriors 4, it's the current Pirate Warriors game. This one, if you are interested in Warriors games, if you're interested in One Piece, definitely worth checking out. The more interesting one, though, that I did not know about until earlier this year is One Piece Pirate Warriors 3. Now, if you're fine with just buying a Japanese copy of this game, I believe you can do so for like 20, 30 bucks off of eBay. I'm not sure if that physical copy has English on it, but if you're fine with that, you can do that. However, if you are a completionist of your collection, if you want to call it that, and you want an English copy of One Piece Pirate Warriors 3, one does exist, and it was a European exclusive here with One Piece Pirate Warriors 3 Deluxe Edition, which is just really cool. I didn't know until pretty recently that this game got a physical release over there. I guess same thing with Unlimited World Red. I'm not sure why Bandai Namco thinks that Europeans, like, is One Piece bigger in Europe than it is in America? Maybe that's true. But this game is actually pretty rare. When I bought it, there were no copies on eBay or Mercari, and then I checked Mercari like a day later, and it just happened to pop up for, I think, $50. Right now, Price Charting has it at $56, and I did see a copy listed on eBay, I think I want to say for like 70 or 80, so it's not impossible to find, but beyond just being kind of an expensive game, it just isn't very plentiful. There aren't that many PEGI 12 copies of this game on eBay. So if you're a One Piece fan, if you're a Pirate Warriors fan, this is definitely one you might want to keep an eye on. So that is going to do it for today's video. I know there's always more. There's so much more hidden gems on Switch that I think will probably get expensive. So if you want me to do a follow-up video to this, this video does well, I will do so. I will make another video, pull a bunch of games off my shelf, and just kind of talk about them and why I think they might end up going up in price, and also just kind of show off some cool odd games that you maybe haven't seen, and maybe now, maybe watching this video, you're like, oh, I need to add that to my collection. Of course, if you have any suggestions of your own that maybe I should add to my collection, or for other people looking at the comments, drop them down below. What games do you think people should add to their collection? A, because they're cool hidden gem game that most people haven't heard of, or more importantly, for the topic of this video, games that will likely, realistically, based on analysis of the market, what games do you think will end up getting more expensive as time goes on? I would love to hear what you all think down in the comments below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch collecting videos. On Sunday, I posted an unboxing of the Nintendo World Championships, kind of Japanese version versus the US version, so definitely check out that. The week before, I posted a pickups video. I did my 3DS collection, so plenty more content coming on Its-A-Mii here in the very near future. I have a lot of videos already recorded, I'm going to be honest with you, so definitely a lot more coming. But until next time, folks, of course, you can also follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Follow the main channel at BoTalksGames for Nintendo news. And until next time, peace.